Sebastian sat in the plush cocoon of the business class seat, his tall, commanding frame making even the luxury of his surroundings feel smaller. Dressed impeccably in seasonal style, his attire was crisp and precise, just like him. His dark hair, styled with effortless elegance, framed a face marked by both intensity and thought. But beyond the polished exterior, a storm of emotions was brewing inside him, churning like the clouds just outside the aeroplane window. Almost 5 years had passed. What was supposed to be a 2-year study trip had stretched on, first by circumstance, then by tragedy after the sudden passing of his uncle. And through it all, one thought kept gnawing at him. Sissel. The weight of the time that had passed without her, the silence that had settled between them, felt heavier now as he inched closer to home, closer to her. In his hand he clutched a photograph, a snapshot from a time that now felt like a distant dream. Sissel, her eyes full of warmth and love, smiled back at him, frozen in that perfect moment. Sebastian's thumb traced her features in the picture, her cheek, her lips, her eyes. He could almost feel her presence through the image, though he had no idea what awaited him when he saw her again. He closed his eyes and leaned back on the seat, the quiet hum of the engines blending with his thoughts. "The wait is finally over, Sissel," he whispered softly to the photograph, his voice barely audible amid the cabin's quiet bustle. A quiet determination had settled over him. He was coming back for her. All the plans he had made, the life he had imagined for them, were now within reach. But with that determination came a nervous energy. How would she react? Would she be the same Sissel he had left behind? Or had time changed her as much as it had changed him? Would her smile still light up the room the way it used to? Or had she moved on to a future without him? These thoughts gnawed at him, but his heart refused to entertain the possibility of a life without her in it. In his mind, Sebastian played out the moment when he would finally see her. He pictured her face, perhaps surprised, maybe even stunned, as he stepped into her world once more. He imagined wrapping her in his arms, feeling her warmth against him after all these years. He longed to hear her voice, the way it lilted when she laughed or grew soft when she was deep in thought. He craved the familiarity of her presence, the effortless way they had always fit together. He would tell her everything, the years spent away, the unexpected detour in his life, and how, through it all, she had been his anchor, how every plan he had made, every decision had been with her in mind. She needed to know that she had been and still was his future. He sat back, his eyes closed, lost in the swirl of memories and anticipation. Thoughts of Sissel were vivid in his mind, her laughter, her gentle touch, the way she made the world seem a little brighter, a little more bearable. The hum of the engines faded into the background as he let the anticipation of seeing her again consume him. For a moment, the memory of her was so strong that it felt like she was there, right beside him. He could almost feel her presence, smell the faint scent of vanilla that always clung to her clothes. His eyelids fluttered open briefly, and for a fleeting second, he saw her. Sissel, leaning over him, smiling warmly as she offered him a drink, her eyes sparkling with the same affection he remembered. "Want something to drink, Seb?" she asked. Her voice soft, familiar as if no time had passed at all. He blinked, momentarily dazed, and then the image of her blurred. As his vision cleared, the hostess was standing there instead, holding out a tray of drinks. Sebastian shook his head, a small, bittersweet smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Just water, thank you," he muttered, his voice low. The hostess handed him the glass and moved on, leaving him to his thoughts. He exhaled, shaking off the strange, dreamlike moment, and turned his gaze to the row beside him. The seat next to his was a chaotic mess. Magazines scattered across the armrest, an open book sprawled across the cushion, and a handful of chocolate wrappers cluttering the small table. The sight was all too familiar. It was exactly how Sissel used to leave her space whenever they travelled together. She would always laugh about it, calling it her organized chaos. But Sebastian had come to love that about her. For a second, he imagined her there, legs crossed under her, one hand holding a book while the other rummaged through a bag of chocolates. She would glance at him with a mischievous smile, teasing him for his neatness. He could hear her voice echoing in his mind. could see her reaching over to flick his tie or nudge his shoulder. But then, as quickly as the image came, it vanished. Sebastian blinked again, and the seat was empty, neat and pristine, untouched. He ran a hand through his hair and sighed, realizing how deeply she had embedded herself into every corner of his mind. Sissel wasn't there, of course. She was waiting, somewhere out there. But the seat beside him felt like a reminder of the years that had passed, of the space between them that had once been filled with laughter and now felt hollow. He couldn't help but smile at the thought of her, though. That was how Sissel had always been, turning the mundane into something memorable, making messes, sure, but filling the quiet with life and warmth. His heart ached with longing. The messy seat beside him might have been just an illusion, but soon he would be close to her again. Soon the empty space she had left in his life would be filled, and this time he wouldn't let her slip away. Shaking his head to clear the flood of emotions, Sebastian closed his eyes again. Soon, he whispered under his breath, gripping the armrest tightly. With a deep sigh, he murmured again to himself, "See you soon, Sissel," a small smile tugging at his lips as he stared out at the vast, open sky. The distance between them was shrinking with every passing mile, but in his heart, she had never been far. He could only hope that when they finally met again, the love he carried for her in his heart would be enough to bridge the years that had kept them apart. The anticipation in his chest tightened as the plane began its descent. Little did he know, his arrival would not just reignite old feelings, but set in motion a series of events that would change the course of their lives forever. The crisp air filled with a sense of anticipation as Sebastian's footsteps echoed through the driveway of the Anderson estate. The grandeur of the mansion loomed ahead, holding memories of laughter and cherished moments. Eager to meet Sissel, Sebastian approached the entrance, excitement evident in his eyes. "Jane, how have you been? It is so good to see you," he greeted Mrs. Anderson warmly, kissing her cheeks, and without waiting for a response to his first question, he eagerly asked, "Is Sissel home? I cannot wait to surprise her." A motherly smile graced Mrs. Anderson's face as she welcomed Sebastian. "Oh, Sebastian, the bearer of surprises. I cannot believe it is you. When did you return?" she asked. He said with equal enthusiasm, "You are the first spot, directly from the airport." Mrs. Anderson, touched by the response, said, "Oh, my dear, Sissel is not at home right now. She's out, but I am sure she will be thrilled to see you. Come in, make yourself comfortable." Mrs. Anderson engaged Sebastian in a heartfelt conversation. As tales of Sebastian's adventures unfolded, his enthusiasm blended seamlessly with Mrs. Anderson's anecdotes. The air was infused with a sense of homecoming, a journey through the years. However, Mrs. Anderson's maternal instincts could not ignore the absence of Sissel. "Where could she be?" she mused, glancing toward the door as if expecting Sissel to walk in at any moment. She finally decided not to hold back Sebastian anymore, with her eyes reflecting the flickering flames of the fireplace. "Sebastian," she began, her tone a blend of assurance and warmth. "Sissel will be delighted to see you. I will ensure Sissel joins you at your home this evening as soon as she returns." Sebastian was touched by the sincerity in Mrs. Anderson's eyes and nodded with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Jane. I will be waiting." With a final embrace that held the echoes of maternal love, Sebastian left the Anderson estate. He decided to head to his own home to share the joyous news of his return with his parents. The Wilson family estate stood tall, surrounded by meticulously landscaped gardens and grandeur. The imposing structure, a testament to the Wilsons' affluence, exuded an air of sophistication. As Sebastian entered the gates, he could not help but be enveloped by the nostalgia of his childhood home. The butler welcomed him with respect, and Sebastian made his way through the familiar corridors adorned with exquisite artwork. His parents, hearing the news of his arrival, greeted him with unrestrained joy. His mother, a graceful woman with an air of regality, enveloped him in a warm embrace. "Sebastian, my darling boy, you're back!" she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with maternal pride. His father, A distinguished gentleman with silver hair and an air of authority shook his hand firmly. He, of course, knew about Sebastian's arrival, having planned everything with him, but kept it hidden from his wife to surprise her upon Sebastian's request. "Welcome home, son. We have been awaiting your return." Ecstatic at Sebastian's arrival, his mother wasted no time in deciding to throw a welcome-back party that very evening. The mansion buzzed with activity as preparations for the soirée commenced. The ballroom, adorned with crystal chandeliers and opulent decor, was chosen as the venue for the celebration. Guests started arriving in the evening, a mix of close friends and influential acquaintances. The opulent ballroom became a lively scene, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the sounds of a joyous reunion. The air was filled with a blend of classical music and animated conversations. Unknown to Sissel, who was still immersed in her retreat with Ethan, the Wilson estate became a hub of celebration. Sebastian's parents were beaming with pride as they introduced him to their guests and spoke about his time abroad. As the evening progressed, Sebastian's eyes wandered toward the entrance, expecting Sissel.